Years ago, Asobo Studio released A Plague Tale: Innocence. It was one of the first games I did a review for. It had its rough edges, and you could tell it wasn't a big budget title, but it was one of the best games I played that year. Now they've released their big sequel, Requiem. It's bigger, it's prettier, it's sadder. Everything a gamer could want. You were never gonna win, but I'm proud of you anyway. So the first thing most people will notice in Requiem is the big jump in detail and graphical fidelity from the first game to this one. I didn't even know this until shortly before it released, but Requiem is a next-gen title. This game is not on the PS4 or Xbox One. You can stream it on the Switch though. Anyway, as a result, it seems Asobo were really able to make use of current technology to just push a ton of detail into this game. And honestly, it really took me by surprise. I thought these trees in the intro were part of a pre-rendered cutscene. And it's not just the resolution, there's some killer art direction in this game as well. I can remember several instances when my jaw dropped because of how gorgeous this game is. Asobo utilizes color, imagery, and general composition really well throughout the game. Maybe it's just because this is one of my first next-gen games I've gotten to play, but it could well be one of the best-looking games I've ever played. It makes the first game look almost stiff and wooden in comparison. The lip sync still isn't quite there, but I didn't find it very bothersome. Switching gears to the gameplay, Asobo have managed to take some major steps forward. Requiem very much builds off of the first game's mechanics, so anyone who's played Innocence will acclimate pretty quick. As far as combat, Amicia still has her trusty sling with various alchemical mixtures to throw around, but she's become more adept in general combat. She can now use knives in a very similar way to The Last of Us for sneak kills, lockpicks, and as a saving grace. She can also push people into rats or fires for an instant kill with the right skill upgrade. Pots can now be combined with alchemical materials to enhance their effectiveness. The big addition is the new crossbow. This allows Amicia to take out just about any human from a distance aside from those fully armored. But ammo is very limited for the most part, so you'll still have to rely on a variety of tools in your arsenal. This game did a good job in general of keeping me on my toes with all the enemies, from how many there were to how much armor they had, their positioning, and other environmental dangers like the rats. It ain't a Plague Tale without rats. They of course play a large role in the puzzle element of this game. Sort of like the floor is lava, but the floor is an equally dangerous, ravenous mass of hungry animals. Once again, Asobo do a great job of creatively placing and manipulating the rats to keep all these puzzles fresh and interesting. I can only think of one instance related to the rats when I got frustrated because a prompt wasn't appearing and I couldn't figure out what to do. The pacing in general for this game is mostly very solid. The opening chapters especially had me fully hooked. Much like the first game, Requiem knows how to amp up the tension, whether it's giving you just enough time to sneak past a guard to safety, or having you haul ass trying to escape a dire situation. And equally, the game generally knows when it's a good time to let you catch your breath and spend some quality time with little Hugo. Oh my god, look at him, he's so adorable and precious!
Thank you.
So cute. I want to throw up and kill myself.
But there are some places where it slows down. In fact, at about the midpoint, it slows way down. And it sort of turns into an Uncharted game for a while. Chapter 9 has you exploring a Mediterranean island with a new character that tags along. There is very little in the way of combat or rats in this chapter, and the exploration and historical aspects just very much reminded me of Uncharted. Not the worst game to be stuck in, but it just felt like the game was getting away from what made it great. And I was a little worried it was heading for some pretty generic plot devices. Thankfully, after this chapter, it picks right back up. I actually played the rest of the game in one sitting, which is unusual for me. One cool thing the game does is introduce unique mechanics for each of your companion characters. There's a small roster of secondary characters that will join you, and they each bring some skill to the table that puts a new spin on how you can traverse the environment or dispatch enemies. I also noticed that there's a lot of whispering in this game, as the characters are often sneaking around guards or militia. Kind of starts to feel like an ASMR game at some points. But speaking of the dialogue, one thing I really appreciate about this game is how often it restrains itself from being quippy. There are exceptions to this, but there were many points that felt like they could easily be a setup for some MCU-esque sarcastic jabs, but instead, Asobo would often opt for sincerity, and that's honestly pretty refreshing.
Anyway, thank you.
No need for that.
Circling back to the gameplay, I honestly have few complaints as this game is basically a straight up upgrade from the first. But it did feel at times like things were pushed to their absolute limit to the game's detriment, specifically with the rats. If you ever found yourself playing the first game and thinking, damn, they've got a lot of rats in this game, well, buckle your seatbelt because this game breaks the levees on how many rats you can have in one area.
I just found a rat's nest, slaughtered about 200 of them.
200? Couldn't be.
There are some sequences in this game that feel straight out of Resident Evil with the scale of these rat invasions. And believe it or not, there are actually a couple sections, and especially one toward the end, that reminded me of Gears of War. Not a comparison I saw coming. So it does feel a little goofy at times, like it's wearing shoes that are a few sizes too big, but overall I felt the gameplay experience was very well crafted and enjoyable. I did play this one on PC, and overall I was quite pleased with the port. There are a surprising amount of options in the settings here. Not the most extensive, but they've got things like turning off motion blur or chromatic aberration, custom button layouts, they've got a bunch of individual graphic settings to toggle, and there's DLSS. Now I'm still not privy to all the finer details of DLSS, so I just toggled this one to auto, but there are some options here as well, and it was needed. Being a next-gen game, Plague Tale is no pushover to run. I ran this at 1440p at what I assume was a target 60 FPS, although there weren't any options for frame rate when the game first released. I would say it mostly ran at 30, just using my eyes as a measure, especially in the more densely populated areas. This was before they released patches to improve the game's performance. I did some testing after the patch came out, and there was a noticeable improvement in performance, even in the spots where I noticed the most frame dipping. Also, you can quit to desktop straight from the pause menu.
When I played the first game, I felt the strongest asset was the characters and their story. And anytime a game with a strong narrative gets a sequel, I worry that it won't be able to live up to its original title.
But this game took almost no time flat to establish that not only is it on par with the original, it's better. Many of the returning voice actors have noticeably improved their performances, the dialogue itself has gotten better, the camera work, the set design, the theming has improved, there's no old wrinkly Sith Lord as our main villain, and surprisingly, this game packs even more of an emotional punch than the first. One of my concerns with the first game in particular was Amicia's voice actress. I thought her performance was a bit dry. In Requiem, she absolutely turns that around and gives an excellent performance.
I'm Amicia Daroon! Shut up! And I kneel to no one!
And that honestly goes for most of the main cast. Hugo's fantastic and precious as ever. Lucas has a new voice actor who does a great job. And there are new characters introduced to varying results. Some are quite great, while some are a little more generic character-wise. But it's definitely an improvement overall from the original, which was already good. But I don't want to spoil too much, at least not yet, as this story is absolutely worth experiencing fresh, with some twists that I certainly did not see coming. Another really strong element of this game's atmosphere is the music. Good lord! The soundtrack for this game is a treasure, from front to back. It is epic in the most classical sense of the word, and it works beautifully with all the other elements to create some truly tense, grand, peaceful, and devastating moments. If you have any kind of appreciation for OSTs, I would highly recommend checking this one out, even if you don't play the game. Okay, time for spoilers. While I urge anyone who has not played to not listen to this, as there are some big surprises in store, I cannot go without commending Asobo for what they've done here. I struggle to think of the last time I played a game that made me this sad. The ending of this game is the greatest tragedy I've seen in a good while. It was something I didn't expect and something I hated when I first finished it. How could the developers make me do what I did? Why would they build up these characters that I love, only to rip them to shreds before my eyes? Why would they make me kill someone I had come to care for so much? I still may not have the answers to all these questions, but I have huge respect for Asobo regardless. To be honest, it takes a lot of balls to end the game the way that they did.
I realize the end of the game is just that, the ending. So I don't want to judge the whole game just based on the last hour or so. With that said, Asobo really stuck the landing. And on top of that, I really enjoyed the rest of the game that came before it. even if it dipped a bit at the midpoint.
Innocence was my favorite game from 2019, and I can honestly say that Requiem is a better game without question. I cannot recommend this game highly enough. If you haven't checked these games out, definitely check out the first game, as it's still very good, but A Plague Tale Requiem is a certified work of art in my book.